Good morning, children. Today we are going to see first chapter in 8th Civics, the Indian Constitution. See, last class we saw what is a constitution, isn't it? Yes, what is a constitution? A constitution is a written document which contains the rules of governing a sovereign state, isn't it? Yes. Then we saw why does a country need a constitution? Then we saw the purposes of the constitution, isn't it? Yes. Then we saw about Nepal's interim constitution and what did we see? When did the Indian National Congress demand for the Constituent Assembly, isn't it? Yes. Now we are going to see about the key features of the Indian Constitution. Okay. By the beginning of the 20th century, the Indian national movement had been active in the struggle for independence from British rule for several decades, nearly 1857 to 1947, nearly 90 years they fought for India's independence. You know, during the freedom struggle, the nationalists imagined and planned what a free India would be like. See, under the British rule, they had been forced to obey rules, isn't it? Yes. So, the long experience of colonial rule, the leaders thought that India should be a democratic nation. What is democracy? Democracy is a form of government in which people have the power of governance. In democracy, people choose their leaders so that they can exercise power responsibly on their behalf. In democracy, everyone should be treated equally and be allowed to participate in government. So that in 1934, Indian National Congress made the demand for a Constituent Assembly. Okay, now let's see the making of the Indian Constitution. Okay. See, India has its own constitution, isn't it? Yes, in fact, the Indian constitution is the longest written constitution in the whole world, isn't it? Yes. This constitution was prepared by the Constituent Assembly, a group of about 300 people specially elected for the purpose. Actually, the assembly consisted of members of different political parties, representatives of the minorities and the weaker sections of the society and legal experts. The assembly first met on 9th December 1946 and completed its work on 26 November 1949. Actually, Dr. Rajendra Prasad was elected as the President of Constituent Assembly and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was the Chairman of the Drafting Committee of the Constituent Assembly. And he is also referred as the architect of the Indian Constitution. Okay, we have known very well Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was the father of the Indian Constitution, isn't it? Yes, now he is also referred as the architect of the Indian Constitution. Okay, fine. Now, let me show you some picture regarding Constituent Assembly. Okay. See, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and his drafting committee members. In fact, I want to tell you one more fact that why did Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar urge scheduled castes to join the government as well as the civil services? Because Dr. Ambedkar was an important member of the Constituent Assembly, already we have known very well, isn't it? He believed that his participation in the assembly helped the scheduled castes get some safeguards in the draft constitution. But he also stated that although the laws might exist, scheduled castes still had reason to fear because the administration of these laws were in the hands of upper caste Hindu officers. So he urged scheduled castes to join the government as well as the civil services. It would give them a chance to play their role in lawmaking. And also here we can see Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who was the president of the Constituent Assembly, as well as he became the first president of independent India. And they were the members of the Constituent Assembly. Okay, fine. Now let's see the picture of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, who was the prominent member of the Constituent Assembly, and he is also known as Iron Man of India. Okay, fine. See the women who helped to draft the Indian Constitution. Okay. Now let's see, the framing the Indian Constitution was a tough task for the members of the Constituent Assembly. Yes, of course, because the Indian Constituent Assembly had a huge task before them. We know very well India is called land of unity in diversity, isn't it? So, India being a diverse country was inhabited by the people belonging to different religions, caste, class and sector. Thus, they had to frame a constitution which can satisfy the aspiration of each section of society. This was not an easy task. Then, the people of India had emerged as free citizens after independence. It was so important for the framers to incorporate all the rights and duties of the citizens of the country in the constitution. Then India had become independent after experiencing millions of deaths during the partition of the country. It was a traumatic experience for the people. So the partition of the country into India and Pakistan was imminent. Okay. Then, at the time of independence, many princely states existed in India. According to the instrument of accession, these states could either join India or Pakistan or remain independent. The merger of these princely states was a tough and difficult task. The country was thus going through a difficult phase after independence. At the time, the future of the country did not look as secure as it looks today. The framers of the constitution had anxieties about present, and they had to frame the constitution which can keep the country united and strong in the coming years. They also had to ensure that the democratic spirit of the constitution is maintained. And moreover, our economy had been a victim of enormous exploitation. Our natural resources, iron ores, gold mines, wealth and manpower was subject to intense exploitation. Due to these atrocities, the Indian economy on the eve of independence showed poor or low economic growth. Immense efforts and knowledge were essential in order to move ahead. Okay. See, features of Indian Constitution borrowed from other countries such as British Constitution, Weimar Constitution. It is in Germany. Then American Constitution, Soviet Constitution, Canadian, South African, Irish, Government of India Act of 1935 and Australian Constitution. Okay. Now we will see the key features of the Indian Constitution. Federalism. Okay. Federalism. What do you mean by federalism? Federalism refers to the existence of more than one level of government in the country. So what do you mean by federalism? Federalism refers to the existence of more than one level of government in the country. Okay, fine. Let me explain you. See, the existence of more than one level of government in the country. Center, state and local self-government. These are the three-tier system. three tiers of government functioning in India, isn't it? See, this federalism means we have government at the state level and at the center, and Panchayat Raj is the third tier of government. Actually, India is a large country with a vast number of communities living together in it, isn't it? Yes, hence a system needed to be devised that did not involve only persons sitting in the capital city of New Delhi and making decisions for everyone. Instead, it was important to have another level of government in states so that decisions could be made for that particular area, while each state in India enjoys autonomy in exercising powers on certain issues. In fact, here the legal power, the legal authority or legislative, executive authority is divided between the national government and the state government and the local self-government. So, in this federal form of government, subjects on national concern require that all of these states follow the laws of the central government. Of course, for national concern, states should follow the laws of the central government. Then, under federalism, the states are agents of the federal government and they draw their authority from the constitution. So, our Indian constitution clearly derived, clearly given the rights to the state government and the central government. Okay, fine. Now, let's see the parliamentary form of government. Actually, India has the three types of government. What are the three tiers of government? The three tiers of government are the federal government, it means central government, the state government and the local self-government. Isn't it? Yes. So, the different types of government consists of representatives who are elected by the people. Yes, of course, these members of the parliament are elected by the people, the MLAs, member of the legislative assembly, MLAs are elected by the people, and local panchayat board president or municipal corporations mayor or municipalities chairman are elected by the people directly. So, the Constitution of India guarantees universal adult franchise for all citizens. It is also known as universal suffrage. So, Constitution of India guarantees universal adult franchise. Through this, whoever attains 18 years, they can vote. And this means that people of India have a direct role in the electing their representatives. Yes, of course. At the same time, every citizen of the country, irrespective of their wealth, income, gender, social status, race, ethnicity or any other restriction can also contest in elections. So these representatives are accountable to the people. Okay. Now let's see the separation of powers. See, according to the Constitution, there are three organs of the state. What are the three organs? Let us see. These are the legislature, the executive and the judiciary. So what are the three organs of the state? The legislature, the executive and the judiciary. Okay. Here the legislature refers to our elected representatives. Yes, we are electing our representatives on behalf of us. Isn't it? We are electing MPs to the parliament. So, the legislature refers to our elected representatives. The executive is a smaller group of people who are responsible for implementing laws and the running government. You know, here Prime Minister and his cabinet ministers are executive, isn't it? See, the judiciary refers to the system of courts in the country. So, simply we can say in constitution there are three organs of state: the legislative which forms law, the executives which implement the law, and the judiciary which maintain the law and order and resolves disputes. So, in order to prevent the misuse of power by any one branch of the state, the Constitution says that each of these organs should exercise different powers. Through this, each organ acts as a check on the other organs of the state, and this ensures the balance of power between all three. Okay, fine. Now, let's see the fundamental rights. Okay, what do you mean by fundamental rights? Actually, in our Indian Constitution, the fundamental rights has often been referred to as the conscience of the Indian Constitution. What is meant by conscience? The moral sense of right and wrong. Okay. So, the Constitution of India guarantees certain basic rights to all its citizens. These rights are called fundamental rights. There are altogether 6 fundamental rights. What are the 6 fundamental rights? Right to equality, right to freedom, right against exploitation, right to freedom of religion, cultural and educational rights, and right to constitutional remedies. Okay. Now, let's see the right to equality. All persons are equal before the law. It means that all persons shall be equally protected by the laws of the country. So, it also states that no citizen can be discriminated against on the basis of their religion, caste, gender, creed, ethnicity. Here, every person has access to all public places such as restaurants, pubs, temples, community hall, etc. So, the state cannot discriminate against anyone on matters of employment. See, here state refers to a political institution that represents a sovereign people who occupy a definite territory. Okay, for example, the Indian state. Now, let's see the right to freedom. See, everyone has the right to freedom of speech and expressions. The right to move freely, reside in any part of the country, and the right to practice any profession, occupation, or business. Next, right against exploitation. The Indian Constitution prohibits trafficking, child labor, and children working under 14 years of age. Okay. Now, right to freedom of religion. Here, everyone has the right to enjoy religious freedom. It means that everyone has the right to practice, profess, and propagate the religion of their choice. Now, let's see cultural and educational rights. Our Constitution states that all minorities, religious or linguistic, can set up their own educational institutions in order to preserve and develop their own culture. Okay. Then, right to constitutional remedies. A person has the right to go to the court for justice if he or she feels that his fundamental rights are being violated. Okay. Fine. See, before going to see directive principles of state policy, let me explain you about human trafficking. What is human trafficking? The practice of illegal buying and selling of people across national borders. In other words, simply we can say illegal trade in human beings, particularly women and children. So, human trafficking refers to illegal trade in human beings, particularly women and children. Okay. Now, let's see directive principles of state policy. Actually, in addition to fundamental rights, the Constitution also has a section called Directive Principles of State Policy. This section was designed by the members of the Constituent Assembly to ensure greater social and economic reform and to serve as a guide to the independent state, Indian state, to institute laws and policies that help reduce the poverty of the masses. So, ultimate aim of the directive principles is to reduce the poverty of the people. Okay, fine. Now, let's see about secularism. Actually, secularism is an important feature of our Indian Constitution. Actually, a secular state is one in which the state does not officially promote any one religion is the state religion. So, secularism refers the state does not officially promote any one religion is the state religion. Okay, fine. I hope you all will understand this chapter. Thank you.